So I'm going to be honest. We're a week away from the Four Nations, and at this point, I think the U.S. are going to win it. No team, in my mind, has a bigger positional advantage than the United States does with their goaltending. Connor Hellebuyck is just that much better than every other goalie at the tournament, but it's not just their goaltending. I don't know if we've ever seen an American roster this deep. In 2016 at the World Cup, they had a fourth line of JVR, David Backes, and Brandon Dubinsky. Good players, but I'm taking a fourth line of Gensel, Trocheck, and Kreider over that every day of the week. But I think the one thing that plays into their favor more than any of this is the importance of winning this tournament for the States. In Canada, we got guys dropping out because they'd rather have a few weeks off. The States' last men's international tournament win came at the 1996 World Cup, and before that, it was the Miracle on Ice in 1980. They have the most to prove, and in a 4-game tournament, you gotta want it. At the end of the day, saying I think the US is gonna win is not a hot take. They're literally the betting favorites. But isn't that just crazy in itself? It's been 8.5 years since the 2016 World Cup, and in that tournament, the States finished in a tie for last. They lost to Canada, lost to the Czechs, and they got blanked by Team Europe. Fast forward to today, and odds makers believe that they are currently the best hockey country in the world. And I myself wonder if they might just be right. With that, welcome into Top Shelf, presented by our friends over at Enterprise. I'm Aidan Thakkar, joined by John Matisz, Kyle Cushman, and Levi Smith. And fellas, a week away from the Four Nations, and it feels a little bold to me to say that the States are favorites. They are literally favorited to win the tournament. But it's so crazy to think that's how far we've come since we last had a best-on-best tournament. And I think that's my boldest prediction for that. But I'm really excited just to see best-on-best hockey, and I don't know about you guys.
I'm so hyped. Like, it's been so long. Like, when you say the 8.5 years, I'm like, has 2016 already been that long ago? But, like, Matisz hadn't played an NHL game yet. McDavid was going into his second season. Like, it has been a long time since we've seen that. And that was with a weird Team North America where we didn't see quite the full Team Canada or Team USA with the young guns on the roster as well. So I am so excited for this.
The fact that generation of players, the McDavids and the Matthews and stuff, we haven't really got to see in an international setting, aside from playing on a U23 team, is crazy. So to finally get to see like Connor McDavid suit up and represent Canada, it's like
I think if we'd had a tournament in between, maybe there would be consideration, I think, for McDavid to be potentially the captain of this team but he's never had a men's Canada moment like that at all. Sidney Crosby in his first Olympics in 2010 wasn't the captain, but he became the captain when he scored the golden goal, right? Is this McDavid's chance to kind of staple him as the Canada? Because he's the face of hockey right now, but is he the face of Canada hockey yet?
I guess a different way to look at that is, could McDavid be the captain of the Olympic team next year? I think there's a chance. Depends on what happens with Crosby. Like, does he age gracefully? Does he continue to age gracefully, I should say? Or does he fall off a little bit next year? Because I think that the Canadian players are so reverential. Reverential, is that a word?
Yeah,
let's go with it.
We'll allow you to say the word.
It sounds like a good word.
They like to build up Crosby. They looked up to him. Like they can't imagine him not being the captain.
Yeah.
But maybe, give it another year. McDavid will be closer to 30. Maybe Olympics, it makes sense. But here, I mean, it's still Crosby's team.
But at the end of the day, the Bedards and the Macklin Celebrinis of the world grew up idolizing Connor McDavid.
True.
They didn't grow up idolizing
Yep.
Sidney Crosby
Right.
the same way McDavid did, and these guys who still haven't played in this tournament. And I think the idea of McDavid being the captain at the Olympics is a pretty bold prediction of me. But I want to get into some of those for this tournament, the one that's a week away. I think the U.S. winning it. I'm not going to classify that as my bold pick because they are favored. But let's get into everyone's. John, your prediction for this tournament.
Yeah, so I think Anthony Cirelli's line for Canada, and right now, like in projections, it's the fourth line. I think that's going to be the top story of the tournament. And the reason why is, one, like the type of players that could potentially be on that line. Anthony Cirelli, so good in puck battles, penalty killer, a shutdown guy who's got some offense, who's played, really big roles on World Junior teams. He's scored Memorial Cup goals. Like, this guy is a gamer, a real clutch player, and his coach obviously will trust him here. John Cooper coaches him day to day. So you've got that, and then you've got, Travis Konechny. He could really pop here. Seth Jarvis. Is Sam Bennett, who's like kind of penciled in as the 13th forward right now, when he enters the fold, because I'm assuming he'll get some sort of ice time here, does he end up on that line? Like, it's such a menacing line that I feel like even though we're all going to get caught up in, Crosby and look what McDavid's doing and Matthews, I feel like that none of that will be surprising if they all pop off and have these amazing tournaments. But if Anthony Cirelli becomes one of the most important players to Canada, I think next thing you know, he's going to be getting Selke buzz down the stretch. And I just feel like the table is set for him to really lead a very strong fourth line for Canada. And, if Canada's going to win this thing, I feel like their depth is going to be really important.
I would say when you look at Canada's lineup, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but lines 1, 2, and 3, in my mind, are first lines in the NHL around the league. Their line 4, that Anthony Cirelli line, is going to be the line that's probably tasked with the ugly minutes, per se, and I like the idea of them being story of the tournament. Levi, your pick.
Yeah, mine's a bit more broader, I would say, but I am pretty confident in saying that I don't think that one of Canada or the States will be playing in the finals.
So one team makes it?
I think either Canada or either U.S. is there. I don't think we're going to see that famed battle that we always have seen in the Olympic gold medal game back in 2010. I don't think we're seeing that this year. That's where I'm going. Now, it's hard to kind of base this off of the best on best because we haven't seen it in so long. But what I will do is I'll point to the World Juniors and say in 5 of the last 6 years, although the last 6 years Canada and U.S. have won it every time, 5 of the last 6 years, they haven't played each other in the finals. They've been playing these other countries. And if you go back even further, 5 of the last 7 World Juniors, only one of those 2 countries even made it to the medal rounds. They even made the top 4. So I think Canada's not, they're at the point where they're not too good to lose. You know what I mean? Like, they're not just going to steamroll anymore like they used to, and it wasn't even much of a debate. And these other countries are catching up. And, I mean, it's not great to correlate hockey with basketball, but I'm going to do that again in the sense of you look a couple months ago at the Olympics, Canada had that second-best team on paper in those Olympics. They didn't even sniff the medal round. They didn't even come close. So I think these other countries catching up and the international kind of style of play where the goals are down a bit and everyone's a lot more reserved and everything has to be perfect, I think is when these teams with this star power kind of come back down to earth. And I think that's what we're going to see here. I'm not going to go out and say who will be playing and who won't be, but that's where I'm going with. I think Sweden or Finland is in the finals against Canada or USA.
Those Scandinavian teams are being coached by non-NHL coaches, right? And managed by non-NHL managers. And, we see it all the time with Finland. They're kind of plucky. They're always the underdog in this sort of best-on-best format, no matter what the age group is. There's a lot of flaws with their roster, but can they all buy into a certain way of playing that is really low event and sort of pushes the envelope in that sense? Maybe. And then Sweden, obviously, a really strong team too. So I don't think that's out of the question here.
Well, I think what we know is that Canada and USA will play one time in Montreal. One of those teams has to lose that game, but for both of them to go to the finals, right? One team will have to go 3-0, and the other team will have to beat Sweden and Finland. Yeah. That's the only way both teams go to the finals. And I hope we get Canada-USA because how electric would that be right now? But we'll have to see because it's such a short tournament. Anything can happen, and especially in just a winner-takes-all pretty much every single game at this point. You can't afford to lose any of them. Kyle, let's get to your pick, though.
Yeah, I'm going the European route for this one. We've had some Canada-USA talk. I like William Nylander to lead the tournament in scoring. William Nylander in Sweden or wearing a Swedish jersey is just levels up. Yeah. In Sweden, we saw last year with the Maple Leafs when they went on that European trip, he was a stud. He had an overtime goal. It really kind of took off his season towards getting that big contract extension. He also leads all active players in points per game at the World Championships. He has 37 points in 21 games at the Worlds. Obviously, that's very different competition versus best on best. There's a lot of ups and downs or weaker competition at the Worlds. But when you look at his career, William Nylander has always showed up and showed out for Team Sweden. And if they're going to make any noise at this tournament, they need him to do that. He's going to play huge minutes at 5-on-5. He might play every minute on the power play as well. I like him to be a huge contributor, show out at this tournament, and lead the tournament in scoring.
The World Championship stats have helped because he's always out of the playoffs early.
Yeah, there you go.
It's very easy for him to pad his stats, right?
Up there for
but he always seems to go to the World Championships and cook. I'm going to go a similar bold prediction for myself. Instead of leading the whole tournament, I'm going to say Sidney Crosby leads the Team Canada in scoring. I think he, out of all the guys on this team, he's probably the one who doesn't have huge playoffs / Stanley Cup aspirations. What does Sidney Crosby have left to play for in his career? really. He obviously wants to stick in Pittsburgh. They're not winning anything in Pittsburgh. What does he have left to play for? International success. And just continuing to contribute to his legacy. And what better way to contribute to your legacy than at his age to go out and be the best player on Team Canada even still. I think it would be hilarious and just be like, oh yeah, Connor McDavid's the best player in the world. Maybe not. Maybe he just plays with Leon Draisaitl. Yeah. No, but I digress. I do think, though, that when we talk about forwards, that Canada team, like, there are so many guys that could just lead that team in scoring, especially in a 4-game tournament. And that forward group is just stacked. And I want to get into comparing some of these forward groups and just looking at the roster. And I want to start with the forward group. That's obviously, it's always the easiest to talk about a little bit. It's always like the big flashy names. And John, how would you rank Canada's forward group among the other countries?
So I'll start from the bottom, and I'll go with the bottom tier, because I think you can separate these 4 teams into 2 tiers. So at the bottom, I'd put Finland, but not too far from Sweden. And the reason why I give Sweden the edge is I just feel like they have a little more depth, a little more offensive juice. But the reason why Finland's right there with them is that there's a lot of players on Sweden that haven't lived up to their potential this year. So it's like there's a bit of uncertainty there. But, you know, when you look at Elias Pettersson, Philip Forsberg, Mika Zibanejad, there's some guys where you're like, okay, maybe this change of scenery and being with the national team will help, but also not the greatest year. And then if you go to the top tier, so I think I'd put Canada ahead of the U.S., but only very slightly. And what it comes down to for me is just Canada has this amazing mix of star power and playmakers and kind of grittier types. And by gritty, I mean we're not dealing with fourth liners in the NHL. We're dealing with like top 6 guys who are going to play fourth line minutes. But you know, you've got McDavid and McKinnon with the sort of the speed and the incredible skill. You've got guys like Crosby and Marner who are incredible playmakers, and then you've got, you know, that fourth line that we already talked about with Anthony Cirelli and company. And I just feel like even though I love what the U.S. has done with developing players and the type of forward group they have, I give Canada the slight edge because of that sort of that extra star. I feel like, you know, Matthews is a superstar in the U.S., but from there's a bit of a drop-off, whereas with Canada, you've got McKinnon and McDavid.
You've got the best 2 players in the NHL, or at least best 2 centers in the NHL, and the U.S. are stacked as well, but they're also, in my mind, just a little bit less experienced. Sure. They've got a lot of NHL experience under their belt, but who was the States guy in 2016, 2014, 2010? Patty Kane's no longer on the team. Sidney Crosby still on the team. Brad Marchand still on the team. And that also plays into the D-core as well. So with potentially Drew Doughty coming onto the team, we don't exactly know yet, but that American D-core is really, really solid with Hughes and McAvoy at the top. Levi, how would you rank the defensive groups at the tournament?
Yeah, I think a little bit of foreshadowing, but this U.S. group is very good. But I'll go 4-1 as well, and I'm going to start in the same place John did, unfortunately, with Finland. Although I did just say I think them or Sweden could knock off one of these teams, I think it's still safe to say that they probably have the most underwhelming D-core here. I mean, Olli Määttä is a third-line pairing on his own NHL team, and we've got him slotted first line here. So I think that speaks enough. I think they'll hold their own, but they're not going to turn any heads by any means. On to the third team, though. I have Canada's defenseman here at 3. I think I looked at these 3 teams in Canada, USA, and Sweden, and I'll go over them all at once here, but I've got Canada 3, Sweden 2, and USA 1. And the way that I would break it down, these 6 guys are great defensemen, but they're great offensive defensemen. All 6 of these guys are top 30, I believe, in defenseman scoring right now. And I actually think, like we were talking about before, in these closer, lower-scoring games, I don't know if that necessarily is what they need. They have so much firepower on offense, and it's not to say that they had tons and tons of better options shutting down guys. I mean, Evan Bouchard was being considered for this team, and he's got more points than most of these guys. I just think that they kind of have too much offense in comparison to a Sweden, where it's these big, bulky guys who block shots, who play really gritty. Like Victor Hedman is the perfect representation of that, but even like an Ekholm or some of these other guys that they have, Rasmus Andersson, like that's a guy that you need at the international stage who's going to block everything. He's going to just get hurt and banged up just to sacrifice his body and win. So I actually like that Sweden went that direction more. They've got the skill guys still in Carlson but like a Forsling, like a Gustav Forsling, I think is more valuable in this tournament maybe than he is compared to some of those guys on the NHL stage. And then I think USA has the perfect encapsulation of both of those ends. You've got Quinn Hughes, who's leading all defensemen in points right now, and then you've got kind of a Jacob Slavin, or Zach Werenski's their third pairing, and he's third right now, probably in Norris contention. So I think this is the perfect way to build this team, where you've got offense, you've got defense, all into one. So I've got USA's defenseman on top.
Finland's blue line, guys, like this is this is really rough. Like having Miro Heiskanen there before he got injured was like one saving grace where you go, okay, if Miro can be sort of the shutdown guy.
He might have played 40 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say, play 30 to 35 minutes a game. They have like a fighting chance, but you look at the blue line now, I mean, none of those guys are top pair guys. You know, Henri Jokiharju is only on this team because of injuries, and they clearly didn't want him because Jani Hakanpää was chosen first, and he's played like 2 NHL games this year.
Yeah.
So it's really dicey for Finland on the blue line, and like I feel like it might lead to like one of these games being 8-1 for the other side. Like it's because I think that just a talent discrepancy between like say Finland's D and Canada or the US's forward group is just massive.
Mm-hmm. I think if we were to take, I'm trying to figure out who's got the best D corps in the NHL. Maybe Vegas. Vegas is pretty solid. Do any of these defensemen make Vegas's D corps? Maybe
Lindell's a solid like
Lindell
second pair
probably
guy.
does,
Yeah.
but like
That's about
like
it.
it's tough. It's really tough.
I think
I
he's
mean,
the only one.
To be fair, though,
I like Mikkola, but
Mikkola was a top 6 defenseman on the cup-winning team.
But Florida's weird. They just take ragtag guys and they play
true.
so good
Got
for them.
force.
I don't know. I look at this Finland team and I just think UC Saros is going to have to play incredible. But that is the thing about UC Saros is he is good enough to steal a game against any team. Like that's the thing is their D-corps might be rough, and then you look at their centers too, like Barkov, Aho, Hintz, Lindell. Like those are 4 defensively responsible centers. So I think we shouldn't underestimate Finland just because of this defensive weakness. But if we're going to point to any positional group at this entire tournament as being quote-unquote weak, it's probably Finland's D-corps.
Yeah.
But I want to get into Saros because he's going to have a huge role to play, and the goalies probably have the biggest role to play at a tournament like this where everyone else is stars.
Biggest wild card.
Whoever, like that's the one player who can steal a game at the end of the day is a goalie. So how would you rank the goalies or the goalie groups at least at the tournament, Kyle?
Well, the goalie crisis in Canada is clear here because I think that they're last among this group. You look at the group of goaltenders, and there's some decent options here, like Aidan Hill when he's on his game, I think is a really good goaltender, especially for this kind of Team Canada. Jordan Binnington has his moments. Sam Montembeault, when he's playing the Leafs, can have a 40-plus save shutout, and maybe not so much elsewhere. But you look at the Canadian group of goaltenders, and I think both in terms of the depth of the position and who's the projected starter, which I don't even know if we know who the projected starter is. Probably Binnington or Hill, maybe lean towards Hill, but I don't even really know. I think they're pretty clearly the last among this group. So then you go to number 3, and that's where I have Finland's group. Saros, you could potentially push that group higher just based off of UC Saros and what he could do at this tournament as a starter, but you do have to incorporate some of the depth here, and I don't love Kevin Lankinen or Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen as much versus some of the other guys when you look at the top 2 teams. And this is where the asterisk comes in, because Team Sweden, I have number 2, depending on Linus Ullmark's health. If you have Ullmark there and you have Philip Gustafsson there, even though Jacob Markstrom isn't there anymore due to injury, I still think that group is number 2. If you drop Ullmark out and bring in like an Arvid Soderblom or something, then you're leaning a lot on Philip Gustafsson, who he's been great at times over his career, and he's been very good this season, but he's very inexperienced at this kind of level of competition. So I would push Finland to number 2 if Ullmark drops out. And then you get to number 1, and there's a bit of a running theme here, and it's Team USA. You look at that just stacked group of goaltenders.
Crazy.
Connor Hellebuck, Jake Ottinger, Jeremy Swayman. And especially the key here is Swayman has really turned things around over the past couple of months and has been very, very good for the Bruins as of late. So you look at all 3 of those goaltenders, all of them are starting for Team Canada. All of them probably start for Team Sweden at this point. Maybe Linus Ullmark if he's healthy, but he's not healthy. So you probably look at all of them starting for them. And then probably you lean to Saros over
Maybe.
Swayman
Not
or
even
Ottinger,
guaranteed,
but I don't even know
though.
if it's a guarantee because Nashville has been so bad and Saros hasn't been great this season as well. So I think there's a legitimate case where all 3 of these goaltenders could start for literally every other country at the tournament, which is crazy to say for Team USA's depth at this position, but I think it's the clear big advantage, but it's also the most volatile position where they can go in with these 3 goaltenders and we think that they're the best at the position. It's the big strength for Team USA, the clear thing that they have over every other country. and then we could get playoff Connor
I
Hellebuck,
was
or we
about to
could
say.
have some stumbles or anything like that. All it takes is one game for falter, and you're in a very precarious situation at this kind of tournament. So even though Team USA is number one here, it's the most volatile, where we could look at the end of this tournament and Aidan Hell has a 960 save percentage, and we're completely changing
Yeah,
the
the States
conversation.
could get the worst goaltending at the tournament. It's just how it can work. You have to have a hot stretch when it comes to goalies, and we've seen the goalies that win Stanley Cups, and it's
Yeah.
it is sort of
Aidan
The-
Hill,
the-
Jordan Binnington, there's a couple of
the
them on Team
Jets,
Canada.
the Jets go into the playoffs every year with Connor Hellebuck too, and where's that gotten them? So
100%. And
That's one of the key things, though. You look at Connor Hellebuck playing some marquee games
Mm-hmm.
mid-season instead of after 60 starts. I'm curious to see how that plays.
Yeah,
out.
it will be interesting. It will be interesting to see after this tournament what the Jets do with his workload, especially if he struggles, right? If they're like, oh, maybe we need to give this guy
We
as
needed
much
to see
rest
a
as
lot
possible
more
before the
Eric Condon
playoffs.
games.
Yeah.
But I think this is the one position group where it really stinks that we can't have Russia in the tournament because
Yes.
they're the only country that can throw a goaltending group together that rivals the States.
Yeah.
And it's literally I feel like all
I
the
would put
goalies
them number
right now-
one.
Yeah, Vasilevsky, Shesterkin, Sorokin is
Disgusting.
it's unbelievable. But the States are right there too. Like, they're just incredible goaltending farm right now. And the betting odds, because of that, we have them number one goalies, number one defense, number two forwards. The betting odds right now, they are favored to win the tournament. Slightly favored over Canada, followed by Sweden, with a big gap to Sweden, and then a little gap from Sweden to Finland. Levi, would you agree with that ranking? States, Canada, Sweden, Finland?
I think on paper, yes. I think we've kind of displayed that here. I think kind of from a moral standpoint, considering that Canada has been the one to win all of these best on best international tournaments for the last however long you want to put it, it's a little bit interesting. Like, it's not wrong, but it's kind of hard like to look at just to fathom that, USA, it's not like they've been winning gold medals or anything. But I do think this is how I'd have those two. And yeah, I think Sweden and Finland, obviously, it seems pretty clear here that Finland is far below the rest.
So you got U.S. winning the tournament. I have U.S. winning the tournament.
I'm still going with Canada. Until U.S. wins the tournament, I'm not going to say that U.S. will win the
Fair
tournament.
enough. Okay, so U.S., Canada, what do you guys think?
I think the U.S. will win.
Okay.
I'm Team Canada.
All right,
we go.
2-2. That's
There we go.
interesting. And we're all going to be eating our words when Olli Mata wins tournament MVP as Finland wins the whole thing. I really can't imagine that happening. But we are still over a week away from the tournament actually starting. But in the meantime, just a couple days away from a fantastic tee-up for the Four Nations. What better way to get the rivalries going with the rivalry series? Kyle, I know you're all over this. We're getting ready for that. How are you getting ready for that? What are you watching as we get ready for it?
Yeah, very exciting. The PWHL is on their unofficial midseason international break. Most of the teams are at the 15-game mark, which is halfway through the 30-game season. And it's time for the final rivalry series of the season. 5-game series this season instead of the 7 games that it's been in past seasons. So it's the last tune-up before the Worlds. I spoke with Ottawa Charge head coach and Team Czechia head coach Carla McLeod recently, who was going over to Europe for the last European tournament as well. And she kind of outlined that in past years before the PWHL had started, that teams had a couple weeks to really have a pre-tournament camp and lead into the World Championships. That's not the case anymore. The PWHL goes right into the World Championships. You have a few days and then boom, you're into the biggest tournament of the non-Olympic years for women's hockey. So it's very different in terms of how the coaching staffs and how the teams are preparing for the World Championships. This international break is that last tune-up to really see your roster, make some decisions before we look a couple months down the road to the World Championships. And one of those things that goes into that is the roster selection. And one of the big snubs of this group for Canada and USA was Canadian forward Jessie Eldridge. She's top 10 in PWHL scoring this season and was left off the Canadian roster. And her teammate with the Sirens, Abby Rock, had some pretty interesting comments about her being left off. She called her one of the top goal scorers in women's hockey, really stuck up for her, said that she doesn't get enough credit, and actually specifically called out the Canadian staff for leaving her off the rivalry series roster, saying that she's one of the best goal scorers and that she doesn't get enough credit, and specifically pointed to that roster omission for her not being on the roster. So I'm interested to see what happens there in the coming weeks, whether she gets back into the fold with some more hot play in the PWHL leading into the Worlds, or if the Team Canada staff is just looking elsewhere, because she's been great in the past alongside Marie-Philippe Poulin, who we're still waiting to see who plays alongside her wing on the top line, and she's been great alongside Sarah Fillier this season, who's another one of those players that typically plays with Poulin. You would think that Eldridge could step into that spot. not on the roster this time around. And then the final spot is the exciting part because we're heading to the Maritimes for these two games. It's Halifax on Thursday, followed by Summerside PEI on Saturday. And it's always great when Hockey Canada gets out to the Maritimes. They always show out for their Canadian hockey, and it's especially special for a couple members of Canada's staff. Troy Ryan, the head coach of the women's team and head coach of the Toronto Scepters. He's a Nova Scotia native. That's going to be a homecoming for him. And Toronto Scepters captain and longtime Team Canada forward Blair Turnbull, she's also from Nova Scotia. She said that she never really expected to have the chance to play for Canada back home in her home province. She said that the biggest game that she's played in Nova Scotia was probably the 2011 Canada Winter Games. And when you're talking about the Canada Winter Games versus Canada-USA rivalry series, it's a bit of a jump between those two. So those two are very much looking forward to this upcoming. The Maritimes are always great for hockey in general, but especially for Canada hockey. And we saw it a couple years ago at the World Juniors, and I think that both Summerside and Halifax are going to show up for these two games.
Well, we've been talking about expansion recently in the PWHL, and do you think they'd ever consider like Halifax, the Maritimes? I know the NHL would never go out there, which stinks. But do you think the PW would consider it?
I think they would, and they're not part of the takeover tour this season, so there's not a PWHL game there. But I think that this Hockey Canada game kind of serves as a bit of an example to show what kind of interest there is in women's hockey out there in Nova Scotia. I think it would be great to see a team there. I think they'd really support it. In terms of distance, it's actually closer to Boston than some of the Midwest or Western teams as well. So when you're talking about some travel there, I don't think it's likely to be the first wave of expansion. But when you're looking 10, 15, 20 years down the road and the league is in a much more stable position, I think a city like Halifax is the exact kind of place that the PWHL would thrive in, not having that competition really anywhere else. And it's a budding market in terms of women's sports as well. They have a team there in the new NSL with the women's team coming in. They have a base in terms of some of the Canadian soccer stuff. I think it would be great to see the women's hockey impact in that city be there down the road.
Well, I, for one, am excited to get this rivalry series going, and I'm excited to see how it plays out in Nova Scotia and maybe the future of professional hockey over in the Maritimes. That would just be a lot of fun. But I want to flip the script back over to the Four Nations and ask you, John, to empty the notebook, brought to you guys by Enterprise. And I want to ask you about the players with the most to gain at this tournament, because we are getting into a crazy period in the NHL in terms of player movement and all that stuff, and a lot of players could affect their cases at the tournament. What do you got?
Yeah, let's talk about Mitch Marner first, who, in case you guys didn't know, is a pending unrestricted free agent. And very little buzz about that. So he's an interesting one where he's on a 110-point pace, as usual, doing fantastic in the regular season. But the playoffs, that's always been the issue with Marner, and probably in some part why he hasn't signed yet. But the cap is going up. It's going to $95.5 million next year, and then it's going to be in the hundreds the year after that. So all of a sudden, the Maple Leafs have a little more room to work with in terms of re-signing him, which seems to be where things are headed. But also, if you're Marner, you go, maybe I wait till July 1 and decide, what kind of offers am I going to get elsewhere? But those offers, even though they'll probably start at 13 no matter what happens at Four Nations or the playoffs, it can go a lot higher if he has a really strong Four Nations where he's out there against the best players in the league, and maybe he rises to the occasion and becomes kind of one of the stars of this tournament, and that helps his track record, helps his resume, and then obviously we'll see what happens with the Leafs in the playoffs. So Marner's a guy I'm keeping an eye on in that respect. And then next will be Connor Hellebuyck. So we've talked about him throughout the show, but what's interesting about him to me is sort of the legacy aspect of this. So he has 2 Vezinas, and he's probably going to get his 3rd this year. He's had 2 finalists in the Vezina. He's been one of the generation's best, and he's moving in a trajectory where he's going to be probably a top 10 goalie of all time. But team-wise, the furthest he's gone in the playoffs is the conference finals, and it was way back, and I want to say 2017-18 with the Jets. And, not everything's about goaltending. The Jets, whether it's Mark Scheifele or Josh Morrissey or Kyle Connor, they all share the blame in terms of not going the distance. But the fact of the matter is that if you're Hellebuyck, you don't have that long playoff run on your resume. And with the Four Nations, he's set up here to be USA starter. And if he has a really strong tournament here and wins a gold medal, wins the trophy, hey, he's probably locking up that Olympic spot next year. And again, legacy-wise, he'll have something to point to beyond the Vezinas. So Hellebuck's interesting from that respect. And then Chris Kreider. So obviously it's been a gong show in New York all year. He's been in the middle of it as far as trade rumors, as far as I believe he has 18 points in 44 games. Just not enough production for a guy who's not good defensively. Trouba's left the team. Hedo's left the team. Kakko's left the team. Kreider's still there, but I feel like he's going to welcome this change of scenery, even if it's temporary, and maybe he can get his game back on track. The thing about Kreider and his player type, like sort of the net front guy, is that it's kind of a streaky role where like, oh, a puck goes off your leg and in, or oh, the point shot is perfectly there for your tip and you tip it in. Like, I feel like he could go on a run here where he gets 5 goals in the tournament, or he could get a goose egg. Like, I feel like it's one or the other. So he's got something to gain and something to lose as far as his reputation and how this season's really been a bit of a dumpster fire for him and the Rangers. And they're still in the playoff hunt. So, like, if he has a good showing here, maybe it helps down the stretch. Elias Pettersson, speaking of problem markets and teams and turmoil, he got his wish. JT Miller is off the team in Vancouver, right? This was a huge ongoing saga. It's now Elias Pettersson's team. So the pressure's on him, like generally in Vancouver. Well, he's got a little bit of a break here to reset, to be around guys that he knows from Sweden and on the national team, and just get his game back. I mean, if you go back to last year, after he signed his contract, $90 million plus, like a massive contract, 11.6 per year, he's at 46 points in 64 games. That's unacceptable for a guy getting paid what he's getting paid. And also his two-way play has fallen off a little bit. So, the heat is really on Pettersson at this point. It's been on him all year, and, sure, he's dealt with an injury or two, but with Miller gone, it's kind of his team now, him and Quinn Hughes. So does this time with Sweden sort of, recharge him, get him going in the back half of the season, perhaps? And, is he able to, kind of just hit the ground running when he comes back with the Canucks? We'll see. Lastly, I'll talk about Rasmus Dahlin really quickly here. So first overall pick in 2018, hasn't played in the playoffs. We don't know what Dahlin looks like in high-stakes games because he's been with the Buffalo Sabres. And he's such a key to that blue line in Sweden as far as being, maybe he's Hedman's partner or maybe he runs a second pair. And I just think, and this is something that I've been harping on ever since the announcement of the rosters in December, is I think that Sweden, if they're going to win this tournament, or even if they're going to make the final, it's all about that blue line. I think it unlocks everything because they've got depth there, they've got size, they've got mobility, and Dahlin's a huge part of that. So he's someone I'm keeping an eye on too, and just to get him in some big games. I mean, like, this is a high-profile player in a market that needs a winner, for lack of a better way to put it, if Sweden wins, and Dahlin's part of that. So he's, again, another guy. But, I mean, I guess you could make an argument for every guy in the tournament, a lot to gain, a lot to lose in terms of national pride and beefing up that resume. But these 5 guys jump off the page to me.
Yeah, I think the thing that jumps out to me is for all these guys at the tournament, they're playing to earn their spot on the Olympic team.
Yes.
If you play well at this tournament, you will be on that Olympic team next year. If you struggle on a fourth line or a third pair, for your spot may be in jeopardy, especially a year from now. Who knows, like in Canada, who knows what step Connor Bedard and Macklin Celebrini take? Do they threaten the spots of a Anthony Cirelli or a Brandon Hagel or even a Brad Marchand? Like, do we start to see that older generation get replaced? And so all these guys got to bring their A game if they want to play at the Olympics that they've been talking about wanting to play at for 10 years. So I'm really curious to see how it all pans out. And I think it's going to be some really high-stakes hockey. I think it's going to be from that first puck drop. It's going to be pretty casual, like right before, and then that puck's going to drop, and it's going to be go time. Part of me wishes Canada-USA was the opening game because I think that would just be insane.
I like the build-up to it.
But the build-up will help. And my hope for it is that we get Canada-USA in Montreal, and we also get Canada-USA in Boston. I think that's the most intriguing game, at least to me. I don't think any other matchup really has that same pull. But we're going to find out. We're just about a week away from that tournament getting off. And we are now going to get into best part of the show, top shelf trivia. Right now, I have really struggled when it comes to top shelf trivia. I've got no tallies next to my name, but that all changes sometime, maybe hopefully
Everyone
today.
loves an underdog.
Yeah, I love the fact now
He's
that
the Finland of our group.
Yeah.
Finland, the Oli Mata or the Hiroyoki Haru of the defenseman at the
I
tournament.
just love the fact that you're the one that gets to present that board now every time. You
Yeah.
hold up, nothing on the thing for you. I'm gonna grab this for Kyle, who's putting it on for his 5th time now. The top shelf trivia chain.
Shout out to my teammate Josh for the first couple
Yeah.
of those.
Right.
But he's been
Thank you.
The franchise.
he's
Yeah,
been
we're a franchise.
You've been pulling your weight very nicely as of late. So
Good little run here.
Yeah, what we're doing for this one is, we're back with the nationality stuff. We did it last week, and I'm doing it again this week. Not just excluding to 4 nations, though. I'm gonna kind of make it a bit broader and show some love to the countries that don't get to play in the tournament. But what we're doing is, can you name the NHL team based on the nationality of their starting line?
Okay.
So 6 players are going to be on the board for you. You just have to quickly figure out what team this is based on the countries represented by those players. Buzz in, I'll go to you, and you give me your correct answer. Let's get underway. First up on the board, which NHL team is this? John's in quick.
I'm gonna go with the Buffalo Sabres.
You would be correct. This is the Buffalo Sabres.
Nice.
This is the Buffalo
Trying to
Sabres.
figure out who that German winger was.
Oh,
Yeah.
I almost went
Turka,
Oilers,
yeah.
like out of like
Yeah.
just the
Yeah.
default.
I didn't know
German.
Tage doesn't play down the middle. Is that Tage?
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
yeah.
he's been on the wing.
Yeah,
Yeah, Yuri
these
Kulich
are
has
all
been
per
playing.
daily face-off, so
Yep.
don't
It's
come
up
at
to
me.
date, don't
Fair
worry.
enough.
Don't worry.
I
My guy
agree
Yuri
with
Kulich.
it, but I was just like, oh.
Yeah, Yuri Kulich, and then we've got, obviously, we were just talking about him, Rasmus Dahlin there, and UPL. Right?
There you go.
Always-
There you go.
He's got too many names for me to ever remember.
My
how
mom
to
struggles with
say
it too.
it. Yeah. 1-0, John. Next up. Kyle's in.
Detroit Red Wings.
Detroit Red Wings is
Shout
correct.
out Marco Casper.
Yeah.
I knew I had a feeling you were going to be the one getting this, considering where you're at with the niche countries. They only have a couple guys.
It's also very funny that I get it from Marco Casper and not Mo Sider.
I know. Yeah, Marco Gasper, one of 2 Austrians in the NHL. Him, Larkin, and we have Lucas Raymond, and then obviously Ben Sherratt and Mo Sider. And I went with Talbot in the pipes.
Yeah, that's fair.
Is that
Yeah,
fair?
that's fine. That's fine.
I
I'm cool
gauged
with
it
it.
not
Yeah.
based on
I'm cool with
maybe who's starting more now, but who's played more
Fair enough.
during the season.
Yep.
So that's 1-1. Let me say, we only have 5 here. There's a bonus one if there's a tie. We only have 5. Aidan's quickly behind
Oh,
the
he's
8 ball.
already.
now. All
Quickly
right.
behind the 8 ball, but there's just 5 on to team 3.
Oh man, this is so cookie cutter.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take a swing at the Washington Capitals.
That's a correct swing.
Nice.
Nicely
Okay.
done. Where'd you was it the
Russian winger for Ovi, and then Sandin I was thinking about for Swedish,
Yeah.
but I wasn't sure if he was actually on the top pairing or not.
Yeah. No, yeah, this
I'm in
is
trouble here.
quite the
I'm
diverse
significant trouble again.
Caps
Hey,
team.
you get the next 2. It's overtime.
Yeah.
that's true. Fun fact too, obviously, as we know, this team right here, only team with nobody at the 4 Nations.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Which is pretty crazy considering how good they are.
Yeah.
But on to team number 4. Oh my goodness.
I think this is the Florida Panthers.
This is the Florida
Nice.
Panthers. Wow, John.
The
Lightning quick.
Forsling and Barkov. I actually didn't look at the goalie. I probably should have, but
I can't believe with how, I guess, is it the Canadians that tipped you off, or
no,
where'd
it
you go?
was Barkov and Forsling. I'm like, what's the connection?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, I guess I got a little lucky to be honest.
I was just gonna, like, for how, it seemed pretty standard for how quick you were
A lot
able
of
to get that.
Canadians.
All right, 2-2, last one. I mean, we're gonna have a winner here.
I need one
Unfortunately,
just to set up the
2-2.
tiebreak for them to make
yeah,
it
that's true.
dramatic, yeah?
Aidan could slip
Ooh.
in here.
Who are
Aidan's in.
No, well, frick, I thought it was Vegas for a sec, but then it was.
I'll let
Aidan
you take a
So
second.
that's wrong. So I'm passing. I'm done. I got it wrong.
Can I steal?
Go for it. You can steal.
The Dallas Stars.
Dallas Stars is incorrect.
Well,
Kyle.
Heiskanen hurt. Is that what you're thinking on the back end? And
I had another team in mind, and then I switched last second because of the goalie. But
is he gonna get like
It's
a
boiling.
minute to do
I
it?
was
No,
gonna say,
I don't got a pull. I don't got a pull.
You don't have anything?
Yeah.
Wow,
I don't want to
okay.
waste time.
Yeah, that's fair. We have a bonus question. That's what it's for. Just Canadian players. It happens to be the same team of the city that we're currently in. This is the Toronto Maple
No
Leafs.
way.
Oh,
yeah, this is the Toronto
okay.
Maple Leafs.
Wow.
Obviously, yeah, you've got Wallen taking down the net minding duties, and then with Nyes up there on the top line.
Fair enough. I guess I just think when I think of Toronto Maple Leafs players, I can think of 4. That's about it. I don't really think about
I'm so used to Riley being on the left, the rinse and
there you
chip.
go.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, so we're into the bonus
Showdown.
round. Aidan, I unfortunately have to say you do not get to participate in the bonus round.
Give him a winner takes all.
Oh.
No, don't even do that to me. That just makes it worse for me when I lose.
I mean, I don't mind.
Give him
John?
winner takes all.
You
Let's
think
go.
so?
Yeah, sure.
Include
Sure.
it?
Let's do it.
There we go. We're getting a little charity here for Aidan over here. All right, the final one. Winner takes all. Whoever gets this one wins. I'm not going to time you guys. What team is this?
No, it's not the Boston Bruins.
I was gonna say the Bruins too.
It's not because that's not Jeremy
Yeah.
Swayman in net and it's not McAvoy in defense. But that's where my brain went.
Boston Bruins is incorrect.
I think I got this. Carolina Hurricanes.
Carolina Hurricanes is incorrect.
Incorrect.
Oh!
You're missing. This should be.
I
two,
thought the Rantanen up there.
but Aho. No Aho.
No Aho.
All right,
Who
Kyle.
else
I
is
won't cap
Jack?
you this time because we
Well,
need a winner.
I'm trying to rack my brain. So, it's not Nashville or anything like that. I don't got a pull here.
Wow.
I don't want.
Are
I don't
we
want to
going-
take like so much time.
So we got
Rarely. I mean,
we could just have this as a draw.
Yeah, is this
I think this is a draw.
Oh, or is it-
blood?
I mean, can I get one
Yeah,
more?
go for more pulls.
Yeah.
Go for more pulls.
I was gonna let you guys just fire off teams until somebody gets it.
Colorado Avalanche.
Oh,
go.
right,
Yeah,
Natchez.
There we go. Because I thought,
Bravo.
honestly, I thought maybe you forgot about that when you said the Hurricanes.
I don't have
But
a marker, but
He wasn't playing up.
I
there.
did come back as
Good
an H.
job,
I'm like,
good
who's
job.
a Czech winger that's not
Nicely
passing?
done. There we go. John gets the win.
All right.
Very nicely done.
Wasn't
Check mark
pretty,
for
but
him.
it
Passing
happened.
of the torch.
Thank
There
you,
go.
sir.
Nice to see,
All
but
those-
it's fun.
Good
It's
win.
fun. I
Good
love
win.
I love getting
Who
the
was the goalie
nationalities
for
involved.
the Habs?
Kenzie Blackwood.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
He's from Thunder Bay.
One of the Woods.
Yeah.
They got a few of them over there. That's interesting. They got a couple
There you
guys going to the Four Nations and
Rocky finish there, but
it's too bad. Marty Matisz has actually been really good in Colorado
yeah.
to start,
Yeah.
and that
He's a
was
great fit
Like
there.
that's been actually a pretty crazy couple of weeks here, or week or so with these trades and stuff like that. I'm excited to see.
I will say too, there's a lot of checks on those rosters. I mean, they are starting to have a good pulse for. It could have been a 5
I
nations.
mean, when we talk about countries with international success at best on best tournaments,
Yeah.
Czechia is above most other.
They just won the world championship.
They did,
I was gonna say
and
reigning.
I mean they've got best on best wins too,
Mm-hmm.
compared to some of the other countries that just really don't. But no, not at the Four Nations because they can't fully field an NHL roster, I guess, with
Yeah.
NHL players. But they will be at the Olympics, and that'll be really interesting when we get to see that in a week. But they won't be there next week at the Four Nations, and a week from now, John, you will be there. And we are excited to get all the information from you there, and we'll get all that information to you guys as well. So make sure you come back next week for our next edition of Top Shelf, brought to you by Enterprise. But that's all the time we got for today. For John Matisz, Kyle Cushman, Levi Smith, and myself, we will see you next time.